All right, I'm with you.
Cool. Do you want to start off with the pose then, and then we'll get into it?
Yeah. Let me think of a pose. Let me think of a pose. Oh yeah.
I found these in my kid's toy chest, so I was like, let's go with it.
Let's do it. All
Okay.
right, I'm ready.
Ready. Ready, pose.
Make a
Make
point.
a point.
Starting off this week, boozing through it. Fuck it.
And we're boozing. Another episode of Boozing, a truncated episode. We're just going to go straight through boozing through the New Yorker. Due to time constraints and life constraints and so what, we went on sort of a week hiatus, which is much shorter than our previous hiatus of like a year and a half. So this is this is much more preferable. But how you doing, Brett? You have a good? I can take these off
Doing
now.
well.
There we go.
Keep on.
I can't see through them. They're
Oh,
like
you can't? Okay, yeah, you can't read your intro then.
I can't. I don't know why I have those. How I got them. Actually, that's a lie. They came in a toy chest that was for my child, and I've kept them. So
Yes.
I'm doing well as well. Life's been pretty good. So let's go through the boozing through the New Yorker. I got my spiel here. Are you ready for it?
I'm ready for it, babe.
All
Ready,
right.
waiting for it all week.
Are there no more short story writers anymore? Have they gone
No.
extinct?
Sorry. I'm sorry.
Have they gone extinct, leaving us with only the dead and novels who slice out sections of their books to lay them before us on the platter of glossy pages that is the New Yorker? This week, the illustrious metropolis, Meg, has given us Jack and Della, an excerpt adapted from a forthcoming novel by Marilynn Robinson about a man, the white son of a reverend, recently released from prison, meeting a black Methodist school teacher in 1950s Missouri. He's an honest con man, at least honest to himself, and infused with his father's words that no one is not good for their own sake. Because of this, he attempts to seclude himself from others, feeling his proximity to them tarnishes their existence. In a black suit, irony purchased and worn, he meets Della on a rainy day who mistakes the rake for a reverend and calls him as such. Jake allows her to give him the moniker, and they have a tea at her place. The gratitude of a woman to a man who picked up the scattered papers that fell from her hands. After the encounter, he sells the suit for one that better suits him, pun intended, and had happenstance runs into Della again, who is walking with a friend and ignores Jack. It is the 1950s after all. Della seems to forgive Jack his performance and surprises him sleeping on a bench near a bridge. Few words are spoken, but enough was said, and Jack, in his loneliness, later arranged a date with her. He, now tied, new tied, she, new hatted, go to the restaurant. Jack has often been too drunk, but he falls in love. But then Jack hears the voices of the world he has created for himself, of thugs and loan sharks, and decides it's best for Della to avoid her the embarrassment and slips out the back through the kitchen. And then he waits for her to give up on him, the narrator states, and for her to leave. She does, but Jack runs into the thugs he owes money. They take what he has and leave him with a gash to his face from a ringed fist. And the story ends with Jack at the lowest of low. But this isn't a short story. It's the excerpt of a novel from a series, and we know, at least I know from reading interviews, that Jack and Della later have a child and are common law married. They are full characters with so much life beyond the pages we have because there are more pages beyond what we've been given. On this episode of Boozing Through the New Yorker, keeping his distance was a favor, a courtesy to all those strangers who would emerge somehow poorer for proximity to him. This was his demon, an eye for the most trifling vulnerabilities. Jack and Della.
Why do you, well done. But why do you think that the New Yorker or other magazines like it publish excerpts from books and call them short stories?
I don't know. I like. Are they trying to sell these books?
That
Like,
irritates me. I didn't know reading it that because I felt it was incomplete. I didn't feel that, I felt it was almost like a movie that cuts too soon.
Mm-hmm.
at the end credit. You know what I mean? So the reason why is because it's literally not finished. It's
The,
enough
mhm.
of a self-contained segment of a longer story that it was put in is published as a short story.
Yeah, I'm
Maybe.
confused by that too. It's like,
I don't
why
understand.
are there no? Which is why I led with. Well, are there no more short story
Mm,
writers anymore?
right, right.
Like, why do this? Like, she's a Pulitzer Prize winning author for a
Hmm.
book that she wrote about this family. She's kind of got that. What's that dude's name? Faulkner kind of quality to her, where she writes about.
That dude, that William fucking Faulkner, Nobel Prize for Literature. Yeah, the drunk guy. Fucking the
That
dude with
dude.
the impossible to pronounce fictional territory.
Yeah. So
Um,
she revisits these characters and these things. She's a very curt interview too, but it's not her. It's the paper. I don't know why. Like, is an agent pushing it on
it
them?
must be to generate some kind of buzz for the novel. Maybe that's why they do it. Yeah, I guess. But wait, the novel's already published?
No,
Is
it's
that was
coming
that what it
out.
is?
It's coming
Oh,
out. It's
all right. It's starting to make a little bit more sense now.
called
Uh,
Jack, I believe it's called, based on like
oh,
the
interesting.
quick thing. It's about him and his relationship, and like apparently based on a previous novel, Jack is kind of kicked out of the family, or he leaves. He's estranged because at a young age he knocks up a young woman who gives birth to a child that later dies, and like he's got issues apparently that this story doesn't tell us, but it's it's odd that they would do that, like.
Hmm.
But the offering that we have, what did you think of it? Did you like it?
It was the least fair. I didn't. It didn't. The writing was. It felt like a draft. It felt an awful lot like a draft.
Mm,
I didn't find the writing to be very compelling. There were a few metaphors that were beautiful, I
mm,
thought, but I didn't really. I don't understand. Well, like why the 50s?
yeah.
Why the like why there was no rhythm to the sentences. They were
Mm,
of varying lengths. Some were very clipped. The vocabulary was rather elementary, but it didn't seem as if it's because the narrators, it's not like it's sometimes you can have a very like Benji and Sound and the Fury. The
yeah.
vocabulary is obviously very rudimentary because Benji himself is not quite intelligent.
Mm,
So, or at least not intelligent in a traditional sense. Perceptive for sure,
yeah.
but maybe not
What a
articulate.
chapter. What a book.
That was incredible, right? Incredible. But I don't understand like the conceit, like why the writing has to be so bland.
Mm.
It was is the narrator bland? Like I don't understand.
There's
You
a
know.
sentence that I thought was really. I keep thinking about it, and it's really confusing to me. It's one
Yeah.
word. It's
Hmm.
interesting. The
Interesting.
narrator says interesting after
Right.
Della says she likes poetry, or she was like she writes poetry, and it just says interesting. And I'm like, wait, well, like what? The
Well,
narrator
yeah,
is
it's Jack's thoughts or something. Mirroring Jack's thoughts.
sort of,
But I
but
don't. Jack doesn't strike me as being inarticulate.
no, he doesn't.
There's this. It's I don't. Maybe I'll have to read it for a third time. But compared to some of the other stories that we've
Mm,
we've read, especially the one that took place in Rwanda
mm,
and the one about the two lovers
the
who, my
nurses.
God, my memory stinks. We just did these. I can't remember
Uh,
the names of the stories, but the one about the two lovers
uh,
who try to find warmth in the cold, arid loneliness of their lives. That was
mm,
beautiful.
yeah.
You know, I almost feel again. It's. I'm not trying to be down. I mean, this writer won a fucking Pulitzer for God's sake. Yeah, I would blush perhaps to criticize, but
Mm,
there's a there's so much competing for our attention nowadays. Writing has to be better
mm.
than a video, than a YouTube clip, than the
Then a
writing.
tweet.
These are lean times for
Mm,
most writers. There's a few that are just plugged in, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
making millions. They got great. Their screenplays are automatically optioned by Hollywood, right? They're making serious money, and money, of course, is the thing that keeps you secure enough to write every day. Rain or shine, keeps it that unbelievable relief that Joe Rogan described when he recalls the first time that he didn't have to worry about paying bills anymore. Just that. So there's a few writers who have that kind of relief, but most of us don't. And the lean times we're competing with YouTube, we're competing with SoundCloud,
Mm-hmm.
we're competing with iTunes, we're competing with even more traditional forms of media that still are hanging on, still have a few million viewers per program.
Mm-hmm.
We better fucking write in we better be captivating, not only in what we choose to write about, but how we word the story,
Right.
how we construct it, what our rhythm,
Mm-hmm.
our poetry, the diction. It's like I've read Blood Meridian, I think, 3 times this year. It's just so intoxicating
Mm-hmm.
the way that Cormac McCarthy constructs his sentences. It's travertine.
It's amazing how
It's
thick that book is and how terse his language is, right? Like
oh my,
that book in
just
particular.
he sat so and so. Let's take a character, Glanton.
Mm-hmm.
Glanton sat his horse. Holy shit,
Yeah.
beautiful. I mean, it's just you get this. He half turned. Glanton sat his horse and half turned in his saddle. You can completely see it. You can touch it. You can
Mm-hmm.
smell the leather of his saddle. You can feel the heat pouring down on him. You can, because the way that McCarthy would have set up the scene already.
Mm-hmm. So,
Now, in all the things that could occupy my attention, I've
mm-hmm.
read that dumb book 3 times already this year, and it's like the book is 34 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Remarkable,
Yeah.
so beautiful written.
So do you think this is overwritten?
No, I think it's underwritten. Or maybe I don't. I'm
Under-edited.
sorry, I probably answered too quickly. I don't think I understand the question.
Do you think it's like by overwritten as in could be condensed? It could be re-edited to make it more compact. That interesting line sticks out to me because I don't understand what I get from it. Like, why did you have to keep that in there? You could take that entire sentence out, and then I wouldn't have to dwell on it.
It's no disparagement of the writer's talent. I
No.
just think it's not finished.
Mm.
It's not. It's so not even not only is the novel apparently not finished, but that segment, that fragment, that's independent enough of any other narrative to be a narrative in itself,
Mm-hmm.
is not finished.
And it's
It's
adapted, right? We don't know how much of it, like that, all these things that are put into the New Yorker are adapted from the original content. So at least that's what they say. They say adapted for publication, or however they word it. So
Mhm.
it's the medium is the message, right?
Right.
If you're making a novel, that's a different beast than a short story. There are amazing short stories that have never written novels because that's not their medium. That's not what they
No.
do,
A
right?
short story is a story that can be completed in 8,000, 10,000 words, 15,000 words. That's what it means. It's a shorter piece of prose fiction, you know.
What's it called? What's his name? The Gothic writer. I can't think of his name. The guy who did The Raven.
Edgar Allan Poe.
Edgar Allan Poe. He was a short story writer that said a short story should be something that could be consumed in one sitting.
There you go.
Right. That's what his philosophy was. So
And doesn't it have something to do with Aristotle's notion of dramatic unity as well? This idea that I've had this happen before. I read a monster book once by the late Carlos Fuentes.
mhm,
It's called Terra Nostra, right? Our Earth.
mhm,
It's for those of you who can't see, it's thicker than 2 Bibles.
mhm,
It's just a giant. It's an breathtakingly ambitious, beautifully written, captivating, breathtaking book, right? But it took me a fucking year to read it. I had no idea what happened in the beginning. I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
By the time I got to the end, I couldn't even remember what happened 300 pages ago.
Hmm.
I couldn't do it. At least with Crime and Punishment, yes, it's a fairly long narrative, but it's a novel about one thing,
Hmm.
a murder. That's what it's about. It's about a young ex-divinity student committing a murder in balls hot St. Petersburg, right?
Uh-huh.
It's that's what it's about. So even if you can't remember what exactly took place 400 pages ago, you're only 2 weeks away in the narrative logic of the chronological the story's own chronology that it
Hmm.
really what happened 400 pages ago only happened a few days ago to Raskolnikov. So there are some consequences still that are coming to where you are in the book.
Hmm.
So you feel it's the dramatic action is very condensed. The focus is laser sharp, right? It's or razor sharp.
And it's a quick read for its length
Sure.
because of the language
There are
he
some
uses.
parts you get a little bogged. You don't
Uh-huh.
quite know how it fits into the narrative very well. There are a few. It's not a
Hmm.
perfectly constructed novel. It's pretty damn close.
Hmm.
But with Terra Nostra, I just didn't remember at all what had happened at the beginning, and the characters who were very important the first 100 pages who might have been killed off or
Hmm.
left behind. I didn't even remember who the hell they were.
I think it was The Prince that I had some troubles with reading because there were so many characters. So many
Mm.
characters that came and went, and they had like 1,000 nicknames. And try to remember who's like I had to like write out a sheet of like, okay, this is this dude's nickname. But that's Russian. That's a cultural thing. But um, I have the same issue of like having to go back and reread a book because I don't really remember the beginning of it. And
Right.
maybe that's my alcohol soaked brain. Who knows? But
Well, yeah, me too. But I don't think necessarily that that the short story Jack and Della had to be shorter or more compact. It just
mm,
had to be more beautiful.
right.
It had to like I can't help but think that like first of all, are there that few genuine short stories being submitted to the New Yorker nowadays? Like, who's the publisher? Do they have some kind of in
Mm,
with the editor of the New Yorker's literary section? Like, the mind. This is the thing. This is why it's a bad story. I'm thinking more about what went on behind the scenes than about the story itself.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's not like I brought any prejudice to, I've never read uh, Ms. Livingston's works before.
Mm.
Never even heard of her. So it's not like I had like, oh, this fucking, I can't stand the way she writes. No, it's like, oh shit, we have another fun short story to read for the podcast.
Yeah,
Let's do it.
especially since her name is
And I
Miss Robinson.
Robinson, see exactly. No, but I didn't. I don't. I usually don't remember the writers' names. I don't.
Sure,
I
I
just.
don't
I
blame
want
you.
the writing is what I care more about.
Yeah,
Um, and so I can remember what happened in the stories that really stuck out. I can't necessarily remember the names of the people who wrote them.
you're just not left
But
with very much from it. Like if you read for meaning, if you're looking for some sort of meaning to the story, it's more like a character sketch, in a way, more about the character of Jack, who is quite well done and quite interesting. I like that idea of him trying to, which is why I use that sentence, but him like excluding himself from other people to do them a courtesy because there's something wrong with him. Like I can relate to some of that and I thought that was interesting. But at the end of the story, you're just like, it's an episode.
yeah.
It's an episode of this dude's life, and you don't. There's no meaning per se in it.
I am biased in one degree against the story. It's that I don't understand period pieces. I don't understand why in literature. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
know that they're a genre of prose fiction.
Mm-hmm.
I know that, like, this idea that novels of manners or westerns or
Mm-hmm. There's a genre though. That's like
a
fun
genre. Like
stuff.
I actually read a really interesting book years ago about a Roman, like a Rome during the late Republic, when it was just swollen, corrupt. Uh, the rule of law was breaking down. Senators were just had no regard for their office. And there's like a detective series that took place in late Republican Rome, like
Oh,
just
cool.
before Caesar. You know, it's
Uh,
his school is very
that's
well done,
cool.
very atmospheric,
uh,
outlandish, a
mm,
lot of primary colors, a lot of sex, a lot of smells.
mm,
You know, Rome, ancient Rome almost took on this guise of like Victorian England. Like there's a lot of stony lanes and narrow alleyways and towering insulae, like these
mm,
apartment blocks, and people throwing slops out the top windows, and toothlessness and debauchery, and loss of it. It was really interesting,
mm.
like Rome imagined by a detective fiction writer. But I don't understand why period pieces are I don't understand why an author with literary ambitions would write a period piece. I don't get it.
Well, I
I
mean,
almost think the story would be just as relevant in certain parts of America today.
mm,
The taboos surround. I can guarantee you that where I live in Plymouth County, Massachusetts, there are places where a scruffy looking white man
mm,
and a beautiful black woman to go out to eat together, they'd be looked at twice for
mm,
sure, for sure. I just don't understand why it has to take place in 1950 St. Louis. Like I don't.
mm. Well, you were talking about like period pieces, but you wrote about, you talked about Cormac McCarthy's,
Right,
you know, uh, Blood Meridian, which is
right, right. So
genre.
there are exceptions, and that book is almost allegory.
Mm,
It's historical fiction. It's based on genuine, Samuel Chamberlain's account of the Glanton gang and
mm,
scalp hunting along the Mexican border in the late 1840s.
mm,
But that there are exceptions. You're right.
mm.
Blood Meridian is a period piece in some sense, but it's so Homeric
Yeah.
and Shakespearean that you're just complete. Any prejudice you bring
Mm,
to, oh fuck, what is this, a Western? Ew. Well,
mm,
how is that literature? You're immediately confronted both by the rhetoric,
mm.
the the lexicon that McCarthy brings to
If
bear,
mhm.
and the tremendous allegorical weight of the story, where really all generations are being talked about, not just the almost incidental men of the story.
It kind of feels like he's commenting or fucking with like America's founding myth in a way, that like the founding story, the push west, and the cowboys and Indians and that kind of thing, which is
Bush was anything but heroic. It
yeah,
was, you know, and it's just a mesmerizing work of history that I actually learned about through the Joe Rogan podcast. Describes the reign of the last Comanche war chief, Quanah Parker,
mm,
and the there are gripping passages of just these bearded white men streaming out of the Kentucky and Arkansas woods into Texas in the 1820s and 1830s, and they're just getting butchered. Like they don't. It's like there's an arresting passage in Empire of the Summer Moon, the name of this book, where the author describes the frontier between the United States of America and Comancheria as a bleeding edge. These giant, these giant spheres of culture and human habitation.
mm,
One based in Washington and the other based on the Llano Estacado in West Texas. They don't know each other exists, right? They don't. They're touching, right? They're just starting to touch at a point just west of Beja, San Antonio,
mm,
right? And it's like these white men with long rifles are just building forts out in the middle of Comancheria, and the Comanches are Plains Indians. It's total warfare. They don't take prisoners. It's a no. Like if you lose a battle, you're getting butchered, you're getting eaten. You're getting your limbs hacked off while you're still alive. You're getting your balls ripped off by hand. You're getting stuffed in your mouth while you're screaming to death. That's how you don't lose a battle, or because that's going to happen to you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a pastime. Comanches would put Apaches would do this too. It wasn't just them. They'd put guys in spits and roast them alive, and laugh as their eyes melted. It's just, and these dumb like going out there like, oh, this is America, and they're getting butchered, and then
Mm-hmm.
they start butchering, and it's just, what the fuck is going on? That was westward expansion,
Mm-hmm.
right? That was part of the story. It wasn't all Lewis and Clark, this
Yeah.
tremendous tale of discovery and daring do, and
Mm-hmm.
meetings with quote unquote savages, around a campfire, the trading of pelts and
Mm-hmm.
all this shit. It wasn't all just that. It was brutal, and it was winner take all.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, it still is winner take all in America. It's just not as bloody. There's
It's
a tremendous line from The Wire where
mm-hmm.
Frank Sabatka, the Union stevedore, the president of the stevedores union, he's been defeated in almost every way. He's the kind of the main character of season 2, and he's been defeated in his ambitions in almost every single way. His son's in lockup.
Mm-hmm.
His nephew is in deep with the syndicate. He lost his bid to have his peer expanded, and stunned by how everything's gone wrong. He's in his office talking to his lobbyist. His lobbyist is basically washing his hands of him, and he goes, "You know what the problem is with this country? We used to make things, build shit. Now everybody's got his hands in the next guy's pocket.
Mm-hmm.
It still is winner take all in America. It's just not as bloody." So, but
Mm-hmm.
you're right. There are exceptions to that rule, but I just wonder why this short story that we read in New York of Jack and Della had to be a period piece. I don't know.
It's funny. I didn't think of it as a period piece per se. I didn't really pin the time until I read an interview on it because it doesn't say 1950s, right? Like you said, it
No,
could kind of be now in some regard. I obviously knew it was older based on like buying a pack of smokes and newspaper and a bunch of stuff for $1, less than a
for a
dollar.
dollar. Yeah, dollar. And
But
like there were some things. There were books in the library that hadn't been taken out since the war.
yeah,
Shit, you mean 70 years? No, it's just a few years.
when
But
did when does something become a period piece? Because this woman is, I believe, she was born in the 1940s.
hmm
The writer. So if I was to write something that took place in the 80s, would that be a period piece for you?
hmm. If you were born in the 60s, yeah, that's a good point too. I don't think so.
Like,
She's writing from experience, perhaps.
yeah. So when does something become a period piece to in your opinion? I think that's an
When
interesting question.
experience, perhaps, when it's
Mm,
outside of experience. When you're born in the 80s, but you write about the 50s, maybe, or when its focus is perhaps on events that were only happening then, maybe,
that's
you know,
interesting. Like if I was to
perhaps.
write
Because
something about
what is literature,
1950s.
right? Sorry, go ahead.
No,
Sorry.
it's an interesting question because if I were to write something about the 1950s,
hmm
I'd be picking a very particular time for a very particular reason, and that time itself would be like a character, right? Would be the setting would have to be a character for me to pick that particular moment, and then it would
Right.
feel that way. Like the stuff I write now that's contemporary, I don't worry about so much at the time about it. I sometimes think about like, oh, do I need a cell phone? Because if I can get rid of the cell phone, that might make it seem like the time frame in which it exists could be maybe lengthened a bit, right? So I do consider the use of technology in the pieces I write because if you don't need to pen it down to a specific time, try not to, I guess. But
Sure.
I find that, which is why you wrote that short story and you specifically put it in COVID-19, which is very interesting to me to do that. The
Try not to
stories.
be overt about it either. I try to
Mm,
just reference, masks and shit. That's basically the only way I did it.
mm,
I just because I have a funny feeling that very, very soon that's all we're going to be reading in literature. We're just going to be reading about the COVID, the avalanche of COVID stories is now being snowed upon the mountain, of people's computers. The writers are just writing this shit, and if I'm going to publish it this year, it better have masks.
It makes
and others, think, oh, it's not relevant.
That's good. Well, the times are changing, right? Like this is going to be. I read Lawrence Wright, who wrote the Scientology book that we talked about like eons ago.
Oh, yeah.
He has a article in this same issue that's about comparing this story to the plague, and it's sort of optimistic in a way because they're like, well, what did the Black Plague usher in? The Renaissance.
Yes.
So
at what cost?
Well, right, the cost, but we're in this now. I think is kind of his idea. So once we get out of this, what is the world going to be like? How is culture going to change? And is anything we write before this going to be relevant anymore? All our stuff. It's interesting. I'm going to start putting.
And there's another revolution coming too. It's AI.
Yeah.
Or artificial general intelligence, maybe AGI. I mean, that's another thing where, what we thought about before we created infinitely powerful children in our image who are going to be vastly smarter, vastly longer lived, longevitous than we are. We're not, what are they going to write? And how is it going to make Dostoevsky and Rabelais and Cervantes seem paltry and lean and boring by comparison? And then of course I love in my own mind, just to comfort myself, to bring it to this point. That's death. That's fine. It doesn't negate everything that came before it. It's just everything changes. Everything goes away. Everything. Hopefully, if it survives birth, whether real or metaphorical, it assumes a character. It expresses that character. It matures in that, and then it declines and dies. That's everything. So, that you're right. There's going to be, or Lawrence Wright is correct, perhaps. There's going to be a new literature to emerge from this crisis. There's going to be cultural. You used the word zeitgeist earlier. New cultural zeitgeist, but that's fine. That's cool.
What are you going to do about it?
What are you going to do about it? You just got to accept it.
Right, like keep writing about a world without COVID-19. I'm just going to go back to all my stories now and just like edit in everyone's wearing masks. All the stories I've ever written, mask.
It's a simple fix. It really is. It really is almost a cheap trick, and it'll probably be found out by enterprising editors. Be like, you didn't fucking write this during coronavirus time. Stop it. Just put a T-Rex mask on this little kid, or whatever in the story. Fuck you.
That's fun. And
baby.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, this was the truncated version of Boozing Through Lit. We'll be at you next week. I'm Darryl. He's Brett. But next week. Bum, 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 bum. Oh no! Wow! We'll be on doc. I'm going to start announcing the stories we're going to read in advance so people can get on board. So next week we got the
Great Gatsby, peasants.
Yep.
I mean,
if you haven't read it already.
It has the shittiest opening of any great book, but it certainly picks up momentum really quickly.
I can't wait to talk to you about that again.
It's a beautiful book. It's such a beautiful, terse, well-constructed work. I mean, it just flows like a cool river with a generous current. It's so good.
After those two, whatever those dots, those stars are, the first 2 pages. After that, it picks up before, but we can save that until next time. I'm Darryl. He's Brett. We're boozing. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and all the other places where you can find your materials and contents. Keep scribbling.